Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, host of the Football History Dude podcast, right here on the Sports History Network. Now, before we jump into another sports history adventure, let me tell you about this episode's sponsor. We partnered with Rochester Sports Autographs, the largest JSA authenticated autograph distributor in the United States, where you can get deals on over 30,000 autographed sports collectibles. They even have film, music, and other entertainment autographs on the site, so there's something for everyone. Perhaps you're looking for a gift for Mother's Day, or maybe Father's Day. Heck, who needs a holiday as an excuse to give a piece of sports history to your loved ones? Or how about yourself? Today seems like a great day to add to your sports cave, right? But how is RSA able to offer such great deals on JSA authentication, you ask? Well, they do this by making deals directly with athletes, so there are no extra markups, and they choose to pass these savings on to the customer. All orders from Rochester Sports Autographs are top quality and shipped to your door with top authentication and money-back guarantee. And to make sure RSA knows that the Sports History Network sent you, we created a special link for you. All you have to do is head to shoprsa.com/SHN. Again, that's shoprsa.com/SHN. Head over there to get your piece of sports history today.
Welcome to episode 2 of 3 this weekend. This is a baseball edition. We're talking about the 1994 Montreal Expos, the team that could have been. But before we get into that, I want to remind everyone that pitchers and catchers that are participating in the March World Baseball Classic tournament report to camp February 13th. All the rest not taking part in it report February 15th through the 17th. Position players that are participating in the WBC report on February 16th, while all others report February 20th through the 21st. So, baseball season's right around the corner. We are, as of today, looks like we're 9 days away from the first batch, and we're about, I would say, because if the team gets together the 21st, usually about, about 23 days we're going to have live action, So, now, we got a little Did You Know this week, or for this episode, and it comes from the 1994 season. Well, actually, after the 94 season. And it's probably one of the most absurd trades in baseball history. Dave Winfield, playing for his hometown Minnesota Twins, was traded during the season to the Cleveland Indians at the time, or Cleveland Guardians as we know them now, for a player to be named later. Okay, but since the strike happened, no transactions could be made after August 11th. So the Twins officials and the Cleveland officials got together, and this is where it gets really absurd. Is instead of Cleveland just buying out his contract and giving him a cash amount, the Cleveland management team took the Twins management team out for dinner, with Cleveland picking up the tab for the entire meal. And I really hope it was just more than just food, and there was actually some drinks in there to make that bill a little sky high. Because, what are you going to do? You take, 15 guys at McDonald's? Yeah, and you spend, $10? That's $150. So if you take them to McDonald's, you just bought with Dave Winfield for $150? Jeez. So I really hope they went to a steakhouse, got some drinks, had some laughs, did it up right to where the bill was at least, $2,500. Oh, that is the most absurd trade I have ever heard of. Now, let's get to the main topic. We're going to just get right into this today. No beating around the bush, no little fluff, nothing like that. Let's just get right into the 1994 Montreal Expos. A team at the time of the strike was the best team in baseball. They had a 3-game lead over the Yankees for the lead in the major leagues, and they had a six-game lead over the Atlanta Braves in the NL East. This team had pitching, had some hitting, and they played some defense. They were on the trajectory to win it all, and then it all crashed on August 11th when the strike took place. At the time, Montreal is 74-40. Like I said, they're 6 games ahead of the second place Braves, and the Braves that had a great run in the 90s and ran roughshod over the NL at this point. The surprising factor was Montreal had the second lowest payroll, which is even more disheartening for the Montreal fans this year, as in 1994, as the last time that they made the playoffs was in 81, and that resulted when a work stoppage happened as well. So Montreal's luck is not very good with them. So who on the Expos made them dangerous? Well, let's start with the manager, Felipe Alou. He started managing the Expos in 1992, 37 games into the season, taking over for the fired Tom Reynolds. At the time, Reynolds was 17-20 when he was fired, and then Alou took over, and they went 70-55 the rest of the season, and finished in second place, 9 games back of the Pirates in the NL East at the time. Because in 1992, kids, there was only 2 divisions. You had the East and the West, and you had 2 teams that should have been in the East Division that were in the West Division, which would have been the Braves and the Cincinnati Reds. Following that season, he followed that up with a 93 season where they went 94-68-1, and they had a tied, and they finished 3 games back of the eventual NL champs, the Phillies, who then went on to lose to the Toronto Blue Jays due to Mitch Williams giving up a home run to Joe Carter. So we could have had a All-Canada World Series that year. Then in 1994, Alou and the Expos struggled out of the gate. In April, they went 4-9 over their first 13 games. Let's also mention at this time, in 1994, it was the first season where you actually had 4 teams in the playoffs from each league, as they expanded it to 3 divisions. So 94 was essentially supposed to be the first year that we get the wild card teams. So they come out of the gate. Their first 13 games, they go 4-9, which resulted in them in being 8.5 games out of first place. But then on April 19th and through April 30th, they went 9-1 and ended up being 2 games back at the end of the year. In the month of May, they go 15-12, finishing the month still 3.5 games back. June, they end up going 19-8, but they only gained 2 games, so they're still 1.5 games back. And while the Expos are building momentum, going into July, the Atlanta Braves are starting to slow down. Atlanta started out April 15-8, and that was with them going 14-1 in their first 15 games. 14-1, their first 15 games. They went 1-7 to end April. May they went 16-10, which isn't bad. June they went 17-10, still not bad, still good, and still in first place by 1.5 games. But then they go 14-14. 14 wins, 14 losses in July. And they started July by going 4-6 up into the All-Star break. But then out of the All-Star breaks, and meanwhile, at the same time, the Expos in that first couple weeks of July, they went 7-3. And they end up was 1 game up on the division going into the All-Star game. Out of the All-Star game, the Expos slip a little bit. They lose a 4-game series at home against the Giants and fall to 2 games behind. After that 4-game losing streak, the Expos go on to win 11 of their next 12 games, and that include beating Atlanta in Atlanta 2-1 in a 3-game series. Over that same period, Atlanta wins 4 of 5 out of the All-Star break, but then went 6-8 to finish the month. And at the end of the July, the Expos have a 3.5 game lead on the Braves. Atlanta, in the month of August, went 6-4. Meanwhile, the Expos were 9-2 from August 1st to August 11th. So the final standings for the NL East was the Expos at 74-40. The Braves were 68-46. The Mets were 55-58 and 18.5 games back. The Phillies, who just came off a World Series appearance, were 54-61 and 20.5 games back. The Marlins at the time was 51-64, and they were 23 games back. Montreal also had an 8-game lead over Cincinnati for the best record in the NL. Then it had a 3.5 game lead over the Yankees, as I said, for the best record in baseball. Alou and the Expos were so good that year, it looked like the road to the World Series championship would go through Montreal. And that Montreal would also be able to host 4 of the 7 games as well, because back then, kids, it wasn't who won the All-Star game that decided who got to host the World Series. It was the best record that got to choose, that was able to chose who hosted the World Series games. Now, who were the Expos that Alou was managing? With the success that they had, you would have thought that they had multiple starting All-Stars that started, right? No, it's not the case. The Expos had 0 All-Star starters. But they did end up having 5 All-Stars, 4 position players and 1 pitcher. The Expos starting lineup was Marquise Grissom in center, Moises Alou in left, had Larry Walker in right. Around the infield, you had Cliff Floyd at first, Mike Lansing at second, Will Cordero at short, and Sean Berry at third. And at catcher, we had Darren Fletcher. Not a superstar lineup for the 90s, just a good lineup of guys that could hit the ball when needed, keep the runners moving, and score runs. Moises Alou led the team with a .339 batting average, a .397 on base percentage, and a .592 slugging percentage. Larry Walker was the close second with a .322, .394, and .587 slash line. And then you had Will Cordero at short, who hit .294, .363, and .489. Marquise Grissom sold 36 bases and 42 attempts. In the NL, they ranked 3rd in runs scored, hits, on base percentage. They also ranked 2nd in doubles and batting average, and they ranked 1st in stolen bases and sac flies. But they only ranked 9th in home runs. They did not have a number 1 offense, but you know what they did have? And this is the key. Because 2 things, kids. Defense in basketball wins you a championship, and pitching in baseball wins you a championship. And they had the number 1 pitching staff in terms of ERA with a 3.56, shutouts where they had 2, saves 46. They had a 7 strikeouts per 9 innings, and they had a 2.80 strikeout to wash ratio. They had a team average whip of 1.214. They gave up 8.4 hits per 9, but they only allowed 0.9 home runs per 9, so they did not really give up a whole lot of home runs. They had 32 wild pitches on the year, and the only staff that really outshined them in certain points was the Atlanta Braves, and the Braves had Maddox, Smoltz, Glavine, Avery, and Kent Merker. Meanwhile, the Expos were rolling out Ken Hill, whose best 3 years was with the Expos from 92 to 94. 94 wasn't even the best year of that either. 92 was when he went 16-9 with a 2.68 ERA. You had 22-year-old Pedro Martinez, who definitely wasn't Pedro yet, but he showed glimpses of it. He was 11-5 with a 3.42 ERA, and he was named the opening day starter that year. Your third starter was Jeff Fassero, 31 years old and the oldest guy in the starting rotation and the entire pitching staff, and he was also the second oldest player on the team, only behind Randy Mulligan, who played in 47 games at first base and pinch hit for the Expos. It's not like they had a lot of experience in the league either. But this team, they did have consistency, as they had 15 of the players on this roster were on the 93 team, and 10 of them were from the 92 roster that Alou took over. What really made this team special was they were young, cocky, and confident, just like their manager. And I believe Montreal would have won the World Series that year, because of this confidence that they had. And I also believe they would have had to play the Yankees as well, which would have been a young Derek Jeter and a chance to win a ring for Donnie Mattingly. Maybe the Yankees win and Donnie gets his ring, and then Donnie retires and then gets elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Or the Expos win or lose a World Series, but instead of having a fire sale in 95 like the Expos did, they run it back and add as a hot young and are the hot young team. Sign a couple free agents to put them over the top and make another World Series again. And they would have probably kept Walker and Martinez in 97, and baseball stays in Montreal. Felipe Alou is probably one of the greatest managers of all time and one of the most underrated managers at that for what he did with the Montreal Expos. The Expos then could become a dynasty of sorts if that 94 season doesn't end in a strike, right? And at the same time that you have the Expos winning the NL, and instead of the Braves doing it, you have them facing the Yankees in the World Series from, let's say, 94 to 2001. I mean, a guy can dream, right? Have the Expos Yankees every single year. And all I know for sure is that Expos team could have stayed baseball in Montreal no matter what happened. But instead we had the strike, which I get why it did. And at some point we'll go into detail in a future episode about that so everybody can understand why the players decided to strike in 1994. The Expos ended up trading everyone away or let them go once contracts were up. And the Expos slowly become irrelevant. And then they requested to have a new stadium, which obviously Montreal wasn't doing that. And then baseball just got hard in Montreal. So they were bought by the league at one point, and then they were the traveling gypsies, having home games in Montreal and in San Juan, Puerto Rico, for the 22 and 24 seasons before being moved to Washington, D.C. for the 2005. Ted Lerner took over ownership in 2006, and lest we forget, MLB voted in 2001 to contract the league by 2 teams. The 2 teams, you ask, were the Minnesota Twins and the Montreal Expos. You want to know why they wanted to contract the teams? Because they couldn't get government-funded stadiums in the places that they wanted. They didn't want the Twins playing in the Metrodome anymore. They wanted an open-air stadium that they could play in. They didn't want Montreal playing an Olympic Stadium anymore. And they wanted a downtown facility, and neither city would vote to help billionaires and a multi-billion-dollar organization like Major League Baseball pay for a stadium. Same thing going on in Oakland right now. So, but instead of contracting it by 2, in 2002, the Metropolitan Sports Facilities that ran and operated the Metrodome won an injunction for the Twins to play there in 2002, which forced Major League Baseball to keep the Twins and Expos. And then they signed a new CBA in 2002, which wouldn't let any contraction happen until 2006 when it ran out. But by then, the Twins had a new stadium in Target Field, and the Expos, or the Twins had a new stadiums lined up, and the Expos were in D.C. So how did Major League Baseball come to own the Expos? Well, they bought the team from Jeffrey Loria, the guy that owns the Marlins now. And why did they do that? Well, that's because John W.H. Henry headed up a partnership to buy the Red Sox. And at the time, the only problem with that was Henry owned the Marlins. So Henry sold the Marlins to Loria. Loria sold the Marlins to Major League Baseball. And then Major League Baseball eventually sold the team to Ted Lerner after they moved to D.C. So talk about a good old boys club of how it happens. So you have the 94 Expos, right? You have a group of young players that kind of reminds you of the Expos of the 80s when you had Tim Raines and Andre Dawson and Gary Carter all playing on that team. And then you have Larry Walker, Marquise Grissom, who ended up winning a World Series ring with the Braves. Larry Walker ended up being a Hall of Famer by going to Colorado. Pedro Martinez ended up being Pedro with Boston. And that team of young players was just really dominant. You had Felipe Alou, who ended up managing up until like 2001, and then he ended up taking a couple years off before he finally went and managed the Giants after Dusty Baker. Moises Alou would go on to play for the Cubs and the Astros, and he would be infamous in the Bartman situation with the Cubs. And I think if Moises Alou doesn't make the reaction, everybody has seen it. And if you haven't, Google Steve Bartman. He reaches out just like 50 other fans to try to catch a foul ball in an NLCS game that the Cubs hadn't been to since since '89. Right? Hadn't been to a World Series since 45 at that point. And everybody's reaching for it. Alou goes to jump for it. Obviously, he probably can't make the play, but his reaction says it all. And then Bartman gets stuff thrown at him, and that's probably another episode. That's an ESPN 30 for 30 right there, because there's one on that as well. So, there you have it, folks. The 94 Expos team of what-ifs, and then the prevailing aftermath, right? So, the whole reason baseball doesn't survive in Montreal, in my opinion, is because the strike happens. If they get a winning team, which they had winning teams up till then, and then in 95, they come out and throw a loser out there because they sold everything off. And by 97, everybody that was on that team was gone. And then they end up they had Bartolo Colon played for the Expos, was in the Expos system at one time. You had a few other youngsters that did in the early 2000s as well. And they just traded all their pieces away. It was like they didn't care. And obviously they didn't, because then they started averaging 7,000 fans a game. Well, I would like to thank BaseballReference.com for all the stats you compile onto your website. Like I said, still looking for that partnership, sponsorship, or whatever. Just give me a free monthly subscription for the year. It'll be all right. Wikipedia also helped as well. And as I've said before, you can't always rely on Wikipedia says. So always check a second source. And that's why we always go to BaseballReference.com. Okay? I got a funny story about Wikipedia way back in the day. And it deals with Bill Belichick. I kid you not. On Bill Belichick's Wikipedia page, at the time of his height in 2005, 2006, it legit said his manhood was a monkey's manhood on his Wikipedia page. And then it was automatically, obviously, deleted right after that because, because people actually do try to set things straight as well. As always, if you like this episode and you're a first-time follower or a first-time listener, hit the follow button, hit the bell, and make sure to hit the download button. Even if you're not a first-time follower, make sure you hit the download button for me. Okay? Downloads is how things get tracked, as always, and that's what we need to do. And if you're looking for some merch of your favorite podcaster here, Mr. One Guy with a Mic, you can go to sportshistorynetwork.com and click on the link for the shop, and you can get t-shirts, some other cool stuff as well. So have a great day or night, whatever you're listening to, and I will catch you on the next episode of One Guy with a Mic, Dingers and Dunks.
Hi, this is Joe Ziemba, the host of When Football Was Football, here on the Sports History Network. I'm very pleased to announce that I will be partnering with the Sports History Network to give away 2 copies of my latest book called Bears vs. Cardinals, the NFL's Oldest Rivalry. To enter, just head over to the following link, sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways. We hope you'll enjoy the numerous stories in the book, which is largely based on the newly released Dutch Sterneman collection at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Dutch was the co-owner of the early Chicago Bears with George Halas and kept correspondence, financial records, and scouting reports, which now allow us to peek into the management of an NFL club during the first few years of the league's existence. Along the way, we'll meet unusual gridiron characters from years gone by, including a quarterback who could throw the ball farther behind his back than he could throwing it forward, a Bears lineman who was such a good tavern fighter that he decided to enter the boxing universe, and a Cardinals halfback who gave up the NFL rushing title by deciding to not show up for his team's final game of the season. And can we forget the time the Al Capone mob interrupted a Bears-Cardinals game? The new book was fun to research, and I hope you will enter our free contest today. Once the winners are selected, we'll be in touch regarding shipping as well as to inscribe the book personally for you. This might make a perfect gift for Mother's or Father's Day, or simply add it to your own personal collection. Once again, enter by visiting sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways. Thank you and good luck.